Yes. Ugh. Well, welcome back to the Drive channel, and today, as you can see, the Broko-Barchetta here is getting a new shift box. So now, if you watched the last video, if you were one of the 10 people who watched the last video, I said that the next step was actually plumbing. And as I started to move the line to the back of the car, and I actually realized at that point that I have to drop the fuel tank in order to finish the plumbing job. So in other words, to get the line from the brake slave cylinder for the clutch all the way back to the transmission, I have to actually loop it above the fuel tank, which means, of course, dropping the fuel tank. So that's actually not a bad thing, because the fuel tank has to come down anyway if I'm going to replace the cam belts. So I'm going to take that down probably tomorrow, but in the meantime, the parts are starting to pile up, and what I want to do is start putting them in the car so that I'm not just warehousing endless parts. And it'll also make for a slightly better video to show some real progress, which is to include a stick, now that I have 3 pedals. So without further delay, I'm going to have to get to work on that, and we'll see how that turns out. All right, so the next step is to take this out, and as you can see on my car, this is already loose. So there's a screw down in here. This is already loose because this is actually supposed to fit underneath the ashtray, and then obviously you have these 4 prominent bolts here. These are also loose because this piece, this surround piece, is broken on this car, but that's okay. This has to be replaced anyway. I have a new one, and so this will all be replaced today, and there will be a stick shift here by the end of the day. So a nice bit of progress to the project. All right, so this actually came out pretty easy. Just had 4 bolts there and a little clip, which is always difficult to figure out, but you have to pull this little tab back. Some of these clips you have to push in, others you have to pull back. So that one I had to pull back. This one was a little bit more difficult. As you can see, look at the surround for the switches. That is obviously not supposed to look like that. Interesting, these come out as one piece, and you have a what is that, 4 little tiny machine screws, or plastic screws underneath there, metal screws for plastic, whatever. And if we go over here, now we see a big old space. So it goes in order of red, black, and then red and blue finally. That's the order. So hopefully I'll remember that. And next step is to bring in the shifter. Okay, so under the category of nothing is ever easy, this panel here is the panel that you remove from underneath the car. It comes out very easy, 4 big bolts, and the studs are used to just put the new shifter box in place. But when you remove this, there is this metal plate, and this metal plate was glued on with the toughest glue I've ever seen. Whatever that stuff is. And they used more of it than I think they made in the year of 2009 or 1998 in total. So there was a ton of glue on that. What I had to do is actually use the floor jack and a piece of wood to push this up from the floor, and it just broke all of the glue because it was not coming out by hand. Then inside the console, things got complicated again, because this little bracket and this bracket were actually holding the old shift selector. So those were holding this thing over here, something like that. So they were holding that thing in, and they are absolutely 100% in the way of the new shifter box. However, they're not screwed on, they are riveted on, and there's no way. It's kind of like this, and there's no way you can get to the rivets. You could just barely see them. So I took a very big chance, and I broke them. I just twisted this until the rivets snapped and prayed that it didn't do any damage to the center console, which it didn't. So just very carefully, I just took a wrench like this, And I put it on there, and I just twisted it until they just popped off. And miraculously, no damage. So that was easier than I thought it would be, because I predicted possibly cutting it, using a Dremel, doing all kinds of things like that. I don't think any of those would have worked, because you can't even get a Dremel in there. So, well, it worked for me. I don't know if you should do it, but that's what worked. A shifter. It's not hooked up to anything, but it's at least a shifter. So you got the reverse gate. You have to just push down on the lever to do the reverse gate, and for second, third, fourth. We're having some fitment issues, which are going to have to be taken care of later. Now, it would seem that this, like maybe the shifter's in slightly the wrong place, because I have a bit of a gap here, and because of that gap, there's not enough room to put in the climate control. So that may be another thing to fix on another day. But at least at the moment, we have the shifter in. And so we'll call it a successful day with an asterisk. So there you go. The car has now 3 pedals, and it has a 6-speed manual shifter box, if not necessarily the full hookup. We still have some work to do. I obviously still have to plumb the clutch, and I have to put all of the, I have to actually connect the shifter box to the transmission, but I can't do that when the gas tank is in. So another reason why all I did was put in the shifter box today. I'm not going to hook up the shift rod or anything like that, because it will be in the way when I drop the tank. So tomorrow's we're going to be dropping the tank, and from there it's going to be an interesting thing. So what I'm finding out with this project is that there is definitely a critical path, and it's very difficult to know what that critical path is until you're actually in it. So I figured I'd be able to do everything associated with the clutch, and then everything associated with the shifting box, and then everything associated with what were the other 2 things? So the shifter box, the clutch, 3 pedals. What's the other one? There's another workflow that I can't think of. No, anyway, whatever it was. But as it turns out, basically when you get to one point, you may have no choice but to start another thing. So even though it would be a little bit smoother if I could just do one and finish it, do another and finish it, and do another and finish it. Because of the critical path, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is drop the tank tomorrow. Now I have a gearbox, a shifter box in there, and we'll just have to do it as things progress. But that's okay, because ultimately what I wanted to do is have the car completely done when it's time to turn the key and get going. That's the whole point of all of this. The other interesting thing that I've learned so far is it's also very difficult to predict what parts you will reuse. So I bought I found that I bought a lot of bolts and nuts and things like that, which are not really cheap because they're all Ferrari. But the car already had those on there. And yet there are some that I figured would have definitely been reusable, but it turns out that they weren't. So for instance, the little screws that attach to the shift gate look exactly like the same screws that attach to the gate on the F1 shifter switch, whatever you want to call that thing. They look exactly the same from the top, but actually when you take them out, they're a totally different size. You could never use them. Luckily, I bought those, so that's another interesting sort of thing that I've been learning. But things are progressing, and I'm not going to make any promises to myself as to when this will be done, but things are moving forward. So we'll see you in the next video.